8-year-old Jinho pressed his nose against the window of his sleeping quarters, staring out at the endless stars beyond Vela 7 Station. The massive space platform hung in the darkness like a giant metal spider, its arms reaching out to dock hundreds of alien ships. From his room on level 12, he could see traders moving between docking bays, cargo vessels arriving and leaving, and distant lights twinkling like strange constellations. His father, Park Tae-sung, was downstairs in the diplomatic sector working late again. That was fine with Jin-ho. It meant he had time to explore. The boy had been on the station for 3 months now, ever since his father became humanities ambassador to the Galactic Council. Most days were boring. Protocol meetings, formal dinners where adults spoke in low voices about trade agreements and peace treaties. But the station itself was magical. It held thousands of different alien species, each more strange and wonderful than the last. Every corridor led somewhere new. Every turn revealed something unexpected. Jin-ho put on his exploration jacket, the blue one his mother had given him before she passed away 5 years ago. He touched the small patch on the chest. It showed the Earth and stars, a reminder that he came from a world far away. Then he slipped out of his room and headed toward the lower levels. The main corridors were busy with aliens of all kinds. Vreth merchants, tall and thin like walking trees, negotiated with Kalarian traders, a group of ethereal beings who looked almost like ghosts made of living light, floated past him without noticing the small human boy. No one paid attention to children. That was the best part about being 8 years old on a space station. Adults were always too busy. Jin-ho took the lift down, passing levels 8, 7, 6, 5. The crowds thinned out. The corridors became less clean. The walls showed signs of age, with dents and scratches from years of heavy use. He found himself in the trade sector, the part of the station where deals happened in whispered voices and money changed hands in ways that made security officers nervous. This was where he wanted to be. This was where things actually happened. The boy wandered past shops selling things he didn't understand. One store had weapons displayed in a window. Another sold what looked like food, though the colors were nothing like anything he had ever seen on Earth. He pressed his face against the glass, fascinated. A Kalarian clerk inside noticed him and made a gesture that definitely meant, "Go away." Jin-ho smiled and kept walking. At the end of a long corridor, he found a door marked with symbols he couldn't read. It was slightly open, and he could hear voices inside. Serious voices. Important voices. His curiosity pulled him forward like a rope around his waist. Jin-ho peeked through the opening. The room was large and cold, with a long table in the middle. Several aliens sat around it, including 3 Kalarians in military uniforms. The Kalarians were impressive, about 2 meters tall, with smooth, dark skin and 4 eyes that gleamed like polished metal. They were the strongest species in the known galaxy. Everyone said so. Their empire controlled more star systems than any other power. At the head of the table sat a Kalarian officer with more decorations than the others. His uniform was covered in medals and symbols of rank. This was clearly someone important. His name, Jin-ho would later learn, was Commander Vosaith, and he was one of the highest-ranking military officers in the entire Kalarian fleet. At that moment, Vosaith was angry. Jin-ho could see it in the way his 4 eyes narrowed and his long fingers gripped the table edge. His voice, when he spoke, sounded like thunder in a cavern. "The humans offer nothing of value," Vosaith was saying to the other Kalarians. "They are a young species from a backward world. Their technology is primitive. Their military is nothing compared to ours. Why should we grant them representation on the Galactic Council? They should be grateful we allow them to exist in our space." Jin-ho felt a small spark of anger in his chest. His father had told him about these meetings. He had explained that not all aliens respected humans, that they had to prove themselves worthy of respect. But hearing it said so bluntly with such contempt made the anger bigger. He stepped forward without thinking. Maybe it was because he was 8 years old and didn't fully understand consequences. Maybe it was because his mother had always taught him to stand up when someone was being unfair. Maybe it was just the way he was raised on Earth. Bold, curious, unafraid of authority. Jinho walked into the room. All the alien heads turned toward him. The conversation stopped. Vos-8th's 4 eyes fixed on the small human child standing in the doorway like he was looking at a bug. "My species is not backward," Jinho said clearly, his voice steady. "My father is Ambassador Park Tae-sung, and he's here to help humans and aliens understand each other. We come from Earth, and Earth is beautiful and strong. You should respect us because we work hard and we never give up. That's what humans do." It was a simple thing to say, a child's simple defense of his family and home. But to Commander Vos-8th, it was an insult from a lesser being. His anger, already hot, became something sharp and dangerous. Vos-8th stood up from his chair, his massive frame unfolded like a building coming to life. He took one long step toward Jinho, his 4 eyes burning with fury. The Calarian's hand came up, moving fast. And then his hand came down. The backhand strike caught Jinho across the face with the force of a collision. The boy's small body flew backward, crashing into the doorframe. Pain exploded across his left cheek and eye. Stars burst in his vision, not the beautiful kind he saw through the window, but the kind that came from impact and shock. Jinho fell to the ground, his hand touching his face. When he pulled it away, there was blood on his fingers. The silence that followed was absolute, complete. Even the station's background hum seemed to stop. Vos-8th looked down at the child, showing no emotion, no regret. To him, this was correction. This was discipline for a lower creature who had forgotten its place. In Calarian culture, such striking was normal. It was how they taught respect to those beneath them. "Now you understand," Vos-8th said coldly. "Humans are nothing." But what Vos-8th didn't know was that his action was being recorded. The station's security cameras captured everything. By the time Jinho was pulled to his feet by a shocked ethereal trader who had witnessed the strike, the video was already spreading across Vela 7's internal network. Within minutes, thousands of aliens watched a high-ranking military officer strike a defenseless child. Within an hour, the entire station knew. Security alerts were raised. Park Tae-sung received the notification in his office and felt his world crack. And somewhere else on the station, in a private docking bay, a human soldier named Minho received the video on his personal device. He watched it once. Then he watched it again. His hands clenched into fists. The Deathworlder had just learned that the galaxy's rules had changed. Minho sat very still in the darkness of his fighter ship's cockpit, the video playing on a loop on his personal screen. Frame by frame, he watched the Calarian's hand come up. Frame by frame, he watched Jinho fall, the boy's face, the blood, the expression of shock that no 8-year-old should ever have to wear. He had watched the video 20 times now, maybe 30. It didn't matter. Each time, his rage grew colder and more focused. Minho was not like most humans. His body had been rebuilt by military science, pushed beyond normal human limits through processes that were technically illegal in 7 different star systems, enhanced muscle density, reaction time faster than any alien species. A nervous system that had been rewired to handle combat situations that would drive normal humans insane. His bones had been treated with nanocomposite materials that made him stronger than steel while keeping him light enough to move with impossible speed. But more than his body, his mind had been trained. For 15 years, he had learned the art of combat from soldiers who had served in the darkest corners of space. He knew how to kill in 17 different ways. He knew how to disable opponents without killing them, which was harder and required more skill. He knew how to read a situation in a split second and respond with perfect precision. He was humanity's answer to the galaxy's violence. He was a Deathworlder in the most literal sense. And now, watching that video of a child being struck by a creature that represented everything the galaxy feared about humans, their supposed weakness, their supposed inferiority, something broke inside him. The door to his ship opened. Dr. Yunji stepped inside carrying 2 cups of coffee. She was small and dark-haired, with eyes that saw too much and understood even more. She had been with him through the augmentation process, monitoring his psychological state, making sure that the enhancements didn't turn him into a monster. They had been partners for a decade, something between friend and guardian. "I knew I would find you here," she said, moving into the cockpit and handing him a cup. "How many times have you watched it?" Minho didn't answer. She didn't expect him to. Yunji looked at the screen, watching the frozen image of Vos Eighth's hand striking Jinho's face. Her expression hardened. She was a scientist, trained to remain objective, but she was also human, and she understood what Minho was thinking. "Don't," she said quietly. "Don't what?" Minho's voice was calm, which was somehow worse than if he had shouted. "Don't do anything that will get you arrested. Don't make this worse. Jinho's father is handling it. The diplomatic channels are—" "The diplomatic channels will do nothing," Minho interrupted. He finally looked away from the screen, meeting her eyes. "The Calarian Empire will apologize. They might pay a fine. Vos Eighth will be transferred. And that child will grow up knowing that when someone hurt him, the adults did nothing." "That's not true. Park Tae-sung will make sure—" "Park Tae-sung is a diplomat. His job is to find peaceful solutions, to make compromises, to play by the galaxy's rules. But those rules say that a high-ranking officer can strike a powerless child and face no real consequences." Minho turned back to the screen. "I'm not a diplomat, Yunji. I never was supposed to be." Yunji watched him in the darkness. She knew the signs. She had seen them before, during his training when missions had gone wrong. She knew when his mind had locked onto a target. It was both beautiful and terrifying, watching a human being achieve perfect focus, perfect clarity of purpose. "If you do this," she said slowly, "you understand what happens. You'll become an international incident. Humans will be blamed. It could damage everything your people are trying to build here. Or it could remind the galaxy that humans are not to be treated like children themselves," Minho said. He turned the chair and stood. "Either way, it needs to happen." Yunji watched him stand and move toward the armory. She could have tried to stop him. She could have called security, could have reported him to the human command structure. But she didn't. Instead, she set her coffee down and began pulling up files on her personal device. "If you're going to do this," she said, "you're going to do it smart. I'm not letting you throw away your life on a stupid plan." For the first time that night, Minho smiled. "Help me get the layout of the station's security systems." "Already pulling it up," Yunji said. "Vos Eighth is in Medical Sector 7. He's guarded. But the guards are Calarians. They won't expect a problem inside the station. They never expect humans to act." It took Minho 4 hours to move into position. He used maintenance tunnels that few station inhabitants even knew existed. He disabled security cameras not by destroying them, but by feeding them false footage. A trick Eunji taught him, using code that she had written specifically for situations like this. He moved through Vela 7 like a ghost, like a hunter stalking prey. His enhanced body moved with perfect silence and coordination. Every muscle worked as one unified system, every breath controlled, every heartbeat steady. By the time he reached the corridor outside Vos Eighth's medical suite, the Calarian commander was sitting up in a medical bed, 4 eyes staring out at nothing, his body still intact but bruised from the augmentation tests the doctors had performed. Two Calarian guards stood outside the door. They saw Minho coming. They made the mistake of not taking him seriously. What happened next took 7 seconds. The first guard moved to intercept, and Minho slid past him like water flowing around a stone. He struck the alien's neck at just the right pressure point, enough to make him unconscious without causing permanent damage. The second guard tried to reach for a communication device, but Minho was already there, moving faster than eyes could follow. A precise strike to the wrist made the guard drop his weapon. Minho was trained not to kill unless absolutely necessary, but he was also trained to end threats with maximum efficiency and minimum time. Both guards lay on the floor, unconscious but breathing, within 7 seconds. Minho entered the medical suite. Vos-8's 4 eyes went wide when he saw the human soldier. The commander tried to stand, but Minho was beside him in a heartbeat. Not to strike him, not immediately, but to stand there in his space, a reminder that humans were not the helpless creatures the Calarian had assumed. "You hit a child," Minho said, his voice very quiet. "You will remember this." And then Minho showed the galaxy what a true Deathworlder could do. The fight, if it could even be called that, lasted only seconds. Minho disarmed Vos-8, disabled his strength advantage, broke the Calarian's overconfidence into pieces. The commander found himself on his back, unable to move, looking up at a human warrior who could have ended his life with a thought, but chose not to. Minho stood over the fallen officer and activated his communication device. He transmitted on all frequencies, broadcasting to every ship, every sector, every corner of Vela 7 Station. "I am Minho, soldier of the human death world. A child under my species' protection was struck today by this officer. The human child was innocent and defenseless. For this crime, the officer has been corrected. Let the galaxy understand something today. Humans protect their young. We will protect them from anyone. Anywhere. Always. This is not a threat. This is a promise." The message spread across the station in seconds. Everything had changed. Minho walked out of the medical suite, leaving Vos-8 gasping for breath on the floor. The guards remained unconscious. The station alarms had finally begun to sound. He made his way back through the maintenance tunnels, moving toward the docking bay and his waiting ship. Yunji was already in the pilot's seat, ready to launch. As they disengaged from Vela 7, Minho watched the station fall away. He knew what came next. Military vessels would arrive. Demands would be made. But the message had been sent to the entire galaxy, encoded in the simple act of one human standing up for another. The age of treating humans as inferior was over. Whether the galaxy would accept that truth was another question entirely. The Galactic Council Chamber was designed to impress. It was a vast circular space with a domed ceiling that displayed real-time views of the galaxy. Hundreds of delegates sat in arranged sections, each section representing a different spacefaring species. At the center of the room, enormous displays showed crucial information, decisions, and communications from across known space. 2 days after Minho's actions on Vela 7 Station, the chamber was in complete chaos. Park Tae-sung stood in the human section, a small area with only a handful of seats compared to the massive blocks of space given to the Calarians, the Vreth, and other ancient powers. He could feel the weight of thousands of eyes on him, some watching with concern, others with contempt, a few, he noticed, with something like respect. The Calarian delegation had called an emergency session. Their representative, a cold-faced diplomat named Counselor Kesharan, stood at the speaking platform. He was furious, and his fury filled the chamber like a physical force. "The human species," Kesharan was saying, his voice hard as metal, "has shown its true nature. They sent an assassin to attack one of our highest-ranking officers. Commander Vos-8 lies in medical care, injured by this human savage. This is not a mistake. This is not a misunderstanding. This is an act of war, and it cannot be tolerated." the chamber filled with murmurs. Park Tae-sung felt his heart rate increase. He had to stay calm. He had to think. Around him, his human team looked to him for guidance. Ki-jun, the human security chief, sat beside him. Ki-jun was in his 50s, with gray hair and eyes that had seen combat. He leaned close and whispered, "This is what they wanted." Vos Eighth provoked a response, so they would have an excuse to turn the council against us. Park Tae-sung nodded slightly. He had already realized that. But knowing it and being able to prove it were two different things. Before he could respond, another delegate stood. It was Hae Won, a human diplomat who had been working with the council for the past year. She was brilliant and careful, exactly what this moment needed. Park Tae-sung made a small gesture. Hae Won understood immediately. She moved toward the speaking platform, requesting recognition from the council chair. The chair, held by an ancient ethereal being, granted her permission. Hae Won stepped forward, her face calm despite the hostile atmosphere in the chamber. "Honorable delegates," she began, her voice steady. "We acknowledge the injury to Commander Vos Eighth. However, we must address what actually happened on Vela 7 Station. A human child was struck by this officer. The child was not threatening anyone. The child was 8 years old. The video of this incident is available to all of you." She gestured, and the footage played on the massive chamber displays. Thousands of aliens watched Jin-ho enter the room, heard the child's simple words, saw Vos Eighth's hand come up and strike the boy across the face. The chamber was silent as the clip played. When it finished, Hae Won continued. "The human response to violence against one of our young was immediate and appropriate. The responding soldier used minimal force. No lethal weapons were employed. The message was clear. Humans will defend their children." Counselor Kesharon stood again. "The human soldier attacked within the station, violating station neutrality laws. He broadcast propaganda across all channels. These are acts of aggression that would never have occurred," Park Tae-sung interrupted, standing up, "if a Kalarian officer had not committed assault against a defenseless child." The chamber erupted. Alien voices shouted over each other. Some species were already arguing, old rivalries and new alliances forming in real time. Park Tae-sung could see the situation fracturing along philosophical lines. Some species, like the Vreth, believed in strict law and order. They were angry at the human soldier for taking justice into his own hands. But others, especially smaller species that had suffered under Kalarian dominance over the centuries, watched with interest. They saw something different in what had happened. They saw a species willing to fight back. Ki-jun leaned over again. "We're losing the Vreth delegation. But look, the ethereals are divided, and the smaller traders seem sympathetic." "Not enough," Park Tae-sung whispered back. "We need someone from the ancient powers to defend us, or we lose credibility." As if responding to this thought, an ancient counselor stood. His name was Zirith, and he was old beyond measure, older than most species' entire recorded histories. His kind, the immortals, had existed for over 10,000 years. They rarely spoke during council sessions, but when they did, everyone listened. Zirith moved toward the speaking platform with slow, careful steps. When he reached the microphone, his voice came out soft but carried perfectly through the chamber. "I have lived for 10,000 Earth years," he said, addressing the assembled delegates. "I have witnessed the rise and fall of 100 civilizations. I have seen strength expressed as dominance, and I have seen strength expressed as protection. The two are very different things." The chamber fell silent. Zirith had everyone's attention. "The human soldier could have killed Commander Vos Eighth," the ancient counselor continued. "I have reviewed military assessments. The human's training and augmentation were sufficient for lethal action. Yet the human chose restraint. The human chose to hurt but not to destroy. This is the action of a warrior with discipline, not a murderer." Zirith paused, letting his ancient gaze sweep across the chamber. "In my own species' youth, we faced similar trials. We discovered that the galaxy responds to strength, yes, but it also recognizes honor. The humans have shown honor today, not in how they acted, but in why they acted. They acted to protect a child. That is something older than any law, older than any political arrangement. That is a fundamental principle that should be respected. The ethereal chair announced that the chamber would break for deliberations. Delegates began moving to separate sections, forming groups, discussing privately what should be done. Park Tae-sung found himself surrounded by his own people. Ki-jun, Hai-wan, and several other human advisors all looked to him for guidance, but Park Tae-sung's mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about Jin-ho, sitting in a medical suite with bandages on his face, wondering if standing up for his own species had caused a war. That evening, Park Tae-sung went to see his son. Jin-ho was in a private medical room, the bruise on his face angry and purple. The boy's eye was nearly swollen shut. When he saw his father, he tried to smile, but the movement caused him pain. "Does it hurt?" Park Tae-sung asked, sitting beside his son's bed. "A little," Jin-ho said. He paused, then asked quietly, "Is that soldier in trouble? The one who helped me?" Park Tae-sung felt something break in his chest. His son was 8 years old with a face marked by violence, and he was worried about the person who had defended him. He was worried about another human. "No," Park Tae-sung said, making a decision that would change the course of his career. "No, he's not in trouble. Humans look after humans. That soldier understood something very important. We are not going to accept treatment as inferior beings anymore, and neither should you." Jin-ho's good eye brightened slightly. "So we're standing up to them?" "Yes," Park Tae-sung said. "We are." He held his son's hand and made silent promises to himself. Whatever it took, whatever the cost, he would make sure that his son grew up in a galaxy that respected humans, that understood them, that feared what they were capable of if pushed too far. The next day, the council reconvened. The Calarian Empire was still demanding Minho's arrest and extradition. But Zireth's words had changed something. More species were willing to hear the human perspective. The question was no longer whether humans should be punished, but whether the real problem was something else entirely. The galaxy was beginning to understand, and the real test of humanity's future was only just beginning. The Galactic Council Chamber had requested a presentation from human scientists and historians. This was unusual, and the implications were clear. The Council was actually willing to listen to humanity's perspective. Park Tae-sung had spent the past 18 hours preparing the presentation, gathering data, contacting specialists back on Earth. Now, standing in the chamber, he watched as 2 humans entered the speaking platform. Dr. Jina was a xenobiologist, one of the brightest scientific minds humanity possessed. Beside her was Ga-Eul, a cultural historian who understood human society in all its complexity. Both looked nervous, but both moved with purpose. Dr. Jina started with the science. The human species evolved on Earth, a world significantly different from most known habitable planets, she began, her voice clear and steady. Earth's gravitational pull is stronger than 95% of inhabited worlds. Earth's atmosphere contains compounds that would be toxic to many species. Earth's temperature fluctuates dramatically across the planet's surface. She displayed images on the chamber's massive screens. Volcanoes erupting, hurricanes destroying landscapes, predators hunting prey, diseases spreading through populations, the raw power and danger of Earth. Humans evolved in this environment, Gina continued. Our bodies developed enhanced pain tolerance compared to most sapient species. Our muscles recover faster from damage. Our immune systems are more aggressive. Our psychological makeup developed to handle stress and trauma that would break most other species. The Calarian delegation watched carefully. Some of them understood where this was leading. What you call barbarian behavior is actually adaptive response, Gina said. When humans see someone they care about being hurt, their bodies flood with chemicals that prepare for violence. When humans are threatened, we do not flee or submit. We stand and fight. This is not savagery. This is evolutionary excellence for a death world. She paused, letting that truth settle into the chamber. Ga-Yul stepped forward. She was younger than Gina, with passionate eyes that showed her love for her subject. Beyond biology, there is human culture. Humans are what we call a tribal species. For thousands of years, we lived in small groups. The family unit is not just important to humans. It is fundamental to our psychology. Parents would die for children. Children would protect siblings. Humans would commit any action, endure any suffering, to defend those in their group. She displayed historical images. Humans running into burning buildings to save strangers. Humans standing together against overwhelming force. Humans showing mercy to enemies and creating art celebrating sacrifice. "This is who we are," Ga-Yul said. When Commander Vosythe struck a human child, he triggered something deeper than law or politics. He triggered the core of what makes humans human. We protect our young, always. It is not a choice. It is biology merged with culture. It is evolution and society working together. An alien delegate from the Vreth coalition stood, questions forming. But before he could speak, Zireth rose again. The ancient counselor moved to the speaking platform, and the chamber immediately quieted. "I speak now from my own ancient memory," Zireth said. His voice was so old, it seemed to carry the weight of millennia. "Thousands of years ago, my species faced the same struggles. We discovered that civilizations built on aggression and dominance are fragile. They fall apart. But civilizations built on the protection of the young, on the defense of those who cannot defend themselves, those civilizations become strong. They endure." Zireth looked directly at the Kalarian delegation. Commander Vosythe struck a child, believing it was his right as a superior being, but in that moment he revealed the weakness of his thinking. True strength is knowing when not to use force. True wisdom is understanding that respect is earned, not demanded. The chamber erupted again, but this time the tone was different. Delegates were debating the philosophy of what had happened, not just the legality. The ancient counselor had reframed the entire discussion. By the time the session ended, something remarkable had happened. The Kalarian Empire was still demanding Minho's arrest, but fewer species were supporting that demand. In fact, several smaller species, ones that had been dominated by larger powers for centuries, were now openly questioning the Kalarian version of events. Over the next week, the political situation shifted. The human delegation continued to present evidence and arguments. Videos of Vosythe's actions circulated more widely, and each viewing turned more minds toward human sympathy. But the Kalarian Empire refused to back down. Instead, they began military preparations. 3 days after the council presentations, human intelligence reported that the Kalarian Navy was moving toward Vela 7 station. Warships were positioning themselves to form a blockade. It was a threat, clear and direct. Either the humans would hand over Minho for execution, or the Kalarians would enforce their demand through military force. General Dio, commander of the human fleet, called an emergency meeting with Park Tae-sung and other human leadership. The general was old and weathered, a career military officer who had spent his life preparing for a moment like this. "We have 3 options," he said flatly. "First, we surrender Minho and hope the Kalarians accept it as sufficient justice. This will not work. They will simply use it to prove humans are weak." He paused, letting that sink in. "Second, we try to fight. Our forces are outnumbered 3-1. We would lose. Thousands would die. Humanity's presence in known space would end." Ki-jun, sitting across the table, made a small sound of agreement. These facts were already known. Third, General Deo continued, his voice becoming calm and measured, we activate the Deathworlder protocol. Park Tae-sung felt his breath catch. The Deathworlder protocol was a classified military program, known only to the highest levels of human government. It was not a weapon. It was a demonstration. "What is the Deathworlder protocol?" asked Haewon, who had not been briefed on military secrets. General Deo stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. "It is our way of showing the galaxy what humans truly are. Minho is one of our augmented soldiers. He is strong, yes, but he is not unique. We have 50 such soldiers in active duty. We have the capability to breed more. We have been developing human military technology that rivals Calarian designs. We have been building infrastructure that would allow us to wage war across multiple systems simultaneously." He turned back to face the room. "The Deathworlder protocol is a controlled military demonstration designed to prove to any species that attacking humanity would be catastrophically expensive in terms of their own survival. We would not destroy their ships. We would not kill their people, but we would prove that humans cannot be defeated through simple military power." Silence filled the room. "And Minho?" Park Tae-sung asked quietly. "Minho will lead the demonstration," General Deo said. "He will pilot a single fighter through the Calarian blockade and prove that no individual ship, no group of ships, no human can be caught by them unless we choose to be caught." "That will make him a hero," Ki-jun said slowly. "The Calarians will have no choice but to accept his existence." "More than that," General Deo said. "It will rewrite how the galaxy sees humanity, no longer as young and weak, but as something to be respected, something to be feared, something that cannot be dominated." Park Tae-sung looked at the faces of his colleagues. He thought of Jin-ho, sitting in his medical quarters, watching the reports of military movements. He thought of every human child across known space, growing up in a galaxy that either respected them or did not. "Do it," Park Tae-sung said. "Activate the protocol." General Deo nodded. He picked up his communication device and spoke a single sentence. "Execute Deathworlder." The message spread across human military channels instantly. Fleets began positioning, fighters powered up, and far away, in a secure location, Minho received orders to do what he had been trained for his entire life, to show the galaxy the true nature of a Deathworlder. Minho sat in the cockpit of his fighter, running through the final system checks. The craft was human-designed, based on stolen Calarian schematics and improved with innovations that aliens didn't even know were possible. It was fast, it was responsive, it was deadly. The blockade spread before him on the tactical display. 37 Calarian warships positioned in a perfect defensive formation. Most species would see that formation and understand it meant one thing: nothing gets through. To the Calarians, it was an absolute statement of military dominance. Minho wasn't most species. Dr. Eunji's voice came through his communication system. She was coordinating from the command center, monitoring everything. "All systems optimal. The galaxy is watching. Every major power has their cameras pointed at you. This is the moment, Minho." "I understand," Minho said simply. "For Jin-ho," Eunji said quietly. "For all of them," Minho replied. He engaged the fighter's engines, and the craft shot forward like a bullet. The acceleration was so smooth, so perfectly controlled, that it barely registered as movement. Just one moment, Minho was stationary, and the next moment, he was approaching the blockade at speeds that would kill a normal human pilot. But Minho was not a normal human. The first Calarian ship detected him, and alarms began to sound. Minho could see it on his display, the entire blockade suddenly becoming aware that something was happening. They had expected a human fleet. They had expected diplomacy or a negotiated surrender. They had not expected this. What they definitely had not expected was a single human fighter approaching their formation at maximum speed. The Calarian warships began to move, trying to tighten their formation, trying to block the approaching human. It was a reasonable military response, but they were still thinking like a traditional military force, moving at the speed of warship engines and communication protocols. Minho was thinking like a human Deathworlder, moving at the speed of instinct and reflex. He didn't try to break through the formation by force. Instead, he changed direction with such sharp precision that his fighter cut between two massive Calarian warships, so close that observers on both ships could have watched him pass by window to window. The human craft moved like liquid, like smoke, like something that shouldn't be bound by the laws of physics. The Calarian ships immediately tried to follow, to pursue, to capture. But Minho was already gone, already somewhere else, already doing something unexpected. He weaved through their formation like a needle through cloth. Where they tried to block, he was already gone. Where they tried to strike, he had already moved. All across the galaxy, on thousands of ships and space stations, aliens watched in real time as a single human pilot made an entire military blockade look obsolete. Minho's fighter approached Calarian Admiral Kesathar's command ship and did something so impossible that the galaxy would be discussing it for decades. He flew a perfect circle around the massive warship, his fighter's weapons systems locking onto and disabling every defensive system as he passed, without ever giving the Calarian ship a clear shot. It took 45 seconds. When it was done, the command ship was helpless. Weapons offline, shields offline, everything offline. But not destroyed, not damaged beyond repair, just completely defeated. Minho broadcast on all frequencies, his voice steady and calm. I am a single human fighter pilot. Your blockade was designed to stop human military aggression. Instead, I have moved through your formation and disabled your flagship without any Calarian ship landing a single effective strike. This is not superiority of equipment. This is not luck. This is the inherent advantage that a species born on a death world possesses in combat situations. Now understand something very clearly. If one human pilot can do this, what could a full human fleet do? What could human ground forces do? You have three choices. First, you can attempt to continue this conflict and face the certain destruction of your presence in human space. Second, you can accept that your blockade is useless and retreat. Third, you can discuss peace with humans as equals, not superiors. Minho's fighter burned away from the blockade, leaving the Calarian ships in complete disarray. Some tried to pursue and failed immediately. Others simply tried to recover from the shock of what they had witnessed. None of them could catch a human pilot who had no intention of being caught. Across the galaxy, the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. In the Galactic Council chamber, Calarian Admiral Kesathar made a statement that surprised no one who had been paying attention. The Calarian military requests a formal ceasefire with the human species and proposes diplomatic negotiations to resolve all outstanding conflicts. It was a surrender, carefully worded to save face, but unmistakably a surrender. The most powerful military force in known space had been demonstrated to be insufficient against a single human warrior. The psychological impact was enormous, but the political impact was even more significant. Species that had been sitting on the fence suddenly began trading with humans. The smaller powers that had suffered under Calarian dominance for centuries started forming alliances with humanity. The ancient powers, like the ethereals and the immortals, began treating humans as a species to be taken seriously. And on Vela 7 station, something else happened. Jinho was released from medical care, his bruises already beginning to fade. He walked through the station's corridors and noticed that the way aliens treated him had changed. A Vreth merchant offered him free items. An ethereal being bowed respectfully. Even a group of Calarians stepped aside to let him pass, their expressions carefully neutral, but their body language submissive. Jinho didn't fully understand what had happened. but he understood something fundamental. Humans could no longer be ignored. Humans could no longer be treated as children who didn't matter. His father, Park Tae-sung, stood with him on an observation deck that evening. They looked out at the stars, at the massive ships now docking peacefully rather than preparing for war. "What happened?" Jin-ho asked. "Is Min-ho in trouble?" Park Tae-sung smiled, a real smile, the first genuine smile he had managed in days. "No, my son. No, he is not in trouble. In fact, Min-ho just became the most respected military officer in known space. By standing up for you, by forcing the galaxy to acknowledge our strength, he changed everything." "So we're safe now?" Jin-ho asked. Park Tae-sung considered the question carefully. "We are safer," he said. "The galaxy now understands that humans are not to be taken lightly. They understand that we will fight for our young, that we have capability they did not expect, that we are worthy of respect." He placed his hand on Jin-ho's shoulder. "You are safe because you come from a species that will never allow their children to be hurt without response. You are safe because we are human, and humans stand together. Always." Jin-ho leaned against his father's side, watching the stars. Somewhere out there was Min-ho, returning from his demonstration. Somewhere out there were other humans, working to build a future where human children would grow up in a galaxy that respected them. Vosaith, the Calarian commander who had started this entire sequence of events, was being dishonorably discharged and exiled by his own government. He would spend the rest of his life knowing that his moment of violence had changed the course of galactic history. Not because it was evil, though it was, but because one human species had decided, once and for all, that they would accept no disrespect toward their young. The age of human insignificance had ended. The age of human strength had begun.